This memorial to the Holocaust dominates Johannesburg's West Park Cemetery. 6 shofarot are raised against the inhumanity, the ultimate infamy of the deaths of the 6 million, children, women, men, the named and the nameless, their lives taken in the death camps of Europe. 6 fists defend the truth. An undying flame burns in bronze, and the shofarot call out in silence, reminding us that we must not forget. Behind the monument, its creator rests. Herman Wald was born in 1906 in the town of Cluj. At that time it was part of Hungary and was known as Kolozsvár. His home was here, Mikes Kelemen Street in the Jewish quarter. His mother, Pearl. His father, Rabbi Meir Wald.
He was a scion of 7 generations of rabbis. He didn't hold a pulpit, but he was a judge in the rabbinical court, but was invited to sermonize in the different pulpits in Cluj. Then later he became the head of the Rosh Beit Din, so he was actually a very prominent rabbi in that community.
Growing up, Herman was surrounded by tradition, and memories of his childhood in Kolozsvár would later inspire one of the major themes in his work, remembered images of town and shtetl life. His father had planned that he should pursue a religious life as a cantor, but the young boy showed an early and irrepressible artistic urge. In his father's mind, his son's talent conflicted with the second commandment, forbidding the creation of graven images. In time, his father relented, recognizing his son's talent as a gift.
He started university in Budapest in 1926, that was 20 years old, and his dad dies in 1928. So there's not much time to reconcile differences.
Rabbi Meir Wald died after a pogrom that ravaged Jewish Kolozsvár. It did more than sweep away the security of tradition. It brought the promise of a terror yet to come. Herman studied further under master sculptors like Tortilla Albert in Vienna, in Berlin, Paris and London. And like all young artists in this remarkable time, he was caught up in the vibrant exploration of his art, the start of a journey that would take a lifetime to complete. And then, in 1937, he left an increasingly troubled Europe for South Africa. He established a studio in Johannesburg. Then the war came, and he joined up. War had no place for sculpture, and so he found an outlet for his creativity in the writing of carved thoughts, a collection of aphorisms that defined his picture of the world, his view of mankind.
I discovered this book only when I was about 21. My dad's best friend and my godfather, Michael Ben Moshe, was emigrating to Israel. He mentioned this book that he needed to get a copy of. So I rather grudgingly took the thing to university, positioned myself in front of the photocopying machine, page after page, until I actually started looking at what I was copying. He commented very beautifully about a wide range of subjects, from war and peace, the soul, religion, philosophy, history, love.
The world was old when love was merely a thought. And when love becomes a mere story, the world will still be young. During the war, he married Vera Rosenbaum. Later, they settled in this house in Parktown North, and at the bottom of the garden, he built a studio. Here he worked and taught, as he and Vera brought up their family.
When I was young, my dad was at home at the bottom of the garden in the studio, which was fantastic. It was a world of art. His clothes always used to be completely covered in plaster of Paris. He was very gentle, very loving, very easy to be around.
Throughout his life, particularly in his last years, he worked on many large commissions, powerful iconic works that define and enhance the built environment. One of these was Stampede, the Impala Fountain, a gift to the city of Johannesburg from Harry Oppenheimer, in memory of his father, Ernest. The story of the genesis of the Impala Fountain reflects the way in which Herman Wald lived his work with a constant, irrepressible consciousness.
But my dad was on the bus, and he had this idea for the sculpture. And he had no pencil and no paper, but he had bought some cheese. I think he might have had a pencil, or anyway, he peeled the cover off the cheese and started sketching the shape on the cheese. So that then became a model, that became a commission, and then finally the work itself.
Herman Wald didn't live to see his work vandalized, stolen, cut up for its scrap value. What had taken him 6 months to create took his son Michael 18 months to bring back to life. Besides his secular commissions, he worked throughout his life on many religious pieces, thought by many to be his finest work. It was in this period that he created the memorial to the 6 million. Thousands attended the consecration on the 10th of May, 1959. Kriya, twice life-size, stood guard over the Jewish aged home in Sandringham. His wooden choir screen sanctum graced the Orthodox synagogue in Springs. And perhaps the most beautiful of all his pieces, created for the Berea synagogue, is the glorious beaten copper, Wings of Shechinah. He died in 1970 in what was then Rhodesia, at the start of a public work. He left behind some 400 works, explorations of expression and style. Herman Wald wrote, in Carved Thoughts, his book of aphorisms, "Artists are the only kings who are crowned dead," and so it is with him. Despite successful exhibitions in New York and Europe, despite his public works in South Africa, he remained unrecognized, and with his death, his name slipped into obscurity. But now, more than 40 years after his death, Herman Wald gives us, in our age, the gift of new work.
I do know that he intended many of his works to be bigger than the original, and many of the smaller works that he'd done were conceptuals for bigger works. Man and His Soul was always a work that he enjoyed, and in that sense, the enlargement seems to be a perfectly logical destiny for that work. To have it milled and cast from that prime material into bronze is basically taking the identical work of my father's and enlarging it, following every curve of the original. It's his work.
This existing full-sized work, The Unknown Miner, has at last been cast and given a lasting home among the living in our time, gracing our world. In this exhibition, some of his work is presented for the first time, pieces concealed in obscurity for almost half a century.
I think the importance of this exhibition is to show South Africans something of a figure with whom they're very, very familiar, but don't really know much about. And certainly many of them have never even heard of his name. When you say to somebody, "Do you know the Impala Fountain in Johannesburg?" everyone lights up and says yes. But when I say the name Herman Wald, they've never heard that name before. And then you go on and mention examples like the Diamond Digger Fountain in Kimberley, the monument to the 6 million in the West Park Cemetery in Johannesburg, and suddenly a bigger picture begins to emerge of an important sculptor who had a very, very strong presence, who for various reasons has been almost obliterated from public memory.
Exhibition of his work will bring his time and ours together, letting us discover the power and value of his gift. On one hand, far-reaching, deep, experimental, and on the other, traditional and classical. A journey through faith and imagination. The world of Herman Wald. Vera Wald outlived her husband by 37 years. They are together again, beside the monument that is his greatest work. In Carved Thoughts, his book of aphorisms, he wrote, "In tracing the history of mankind, it should not matter where we came from, but where we go to.